What's happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I just want to open this video with a thank you to the YouTube community. While occasionally the YouTube community can be a little harsh, sometimes it can be really useful because at the end of Westworld Season 1, I started asking people what should be the next show that I review now that Westworld's drawing to a close, and a couple people, to whom I will always be grateful, suggested The Expanse. Now, I waited till basically a couple days ago, and then I just burned through season 1 just out of curiosity. And while I'll admit the first couple episodes I was having a little trouble getting into it because I have not read the books, and there's a lot going on in the show, and there are a lot of characters and a lot of factions and a lot of new lingo. Around episode 4 or 5, I found myself hopelessly completely addicted to the point where I started binging, and by the end I was completely obsessed, terrified and mesmerized, and just obsessed. And now I'm convinced that The Expanse is one of the all-time great science fiction shows, without question. Certainly the best science fiction show that I'm aware of right now. Although, I don't know, is Westworld a Western or sci-fi or both? Who knows? Point is, The Expanse kicks ass, and tonight we were treated to a double feature premiere of episode 1 and episode 2, and they were fucking awesome. So I'm a very, very thrilled fan, and even better is that season 2 is going to be 13 episodes compared to the 10 episodes in season 1. So my recommendation is, if you like science fiction, I don't care if you like hardcore science fiction, like really dense 1,000-page tomes that are almost indecipherable, or if you just like chill, kind of user-friendly, accessible, fun science fiction, there's something in The Expanse for everyone, whether you want politics or space combat or otherworldly threats or sex and all kinds of good stuff. The Expanse rocks. So let's get into episode 1 of season 2. It's going to be kind of hard to distinguish between episode 1 and episode 2 because on Syfy channel, they just kind of played it all as one big story. So I'm not quite sure where the break is. So I'm just going to review both at the same time. So before I go into any details of any kind, I do need to give a shout out to the guys who created this world. It's based on a series of novels by James S.A. Corey, but that person does not exist. It's actually 2 authors, and their names are Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. And apparently the pen name is a combination of their names and like their daughter's names. At any rate, they created the series of books, which I'm very tempted to get into because I like spoilers, and I might want to read ahead, so I might have to just rip through the first few books. But apparently there are already 6 novels in the Expanse series, so if I get hooked, that means I've got a lot of good stuff to look forward to. And unlike some guys like George R. R. Martin, these guys have been writing a book a year for the last 6 years and have 3 more on the way, and they're going boom, 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 one every year, so I very well might have to dig into this. But we're not here to talk about books, we're here to talk about TV, so let's get into it. As I mentioned before, this is a show with an enormous cast of characters, tons of speaking roles. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to refer to them by their character names whenever possible. I will occasionally probably make a little mistake about the various factions and the political alliances because, like I said, I haven't read the books, and I binge-watched the first season, so I'm still kind of assimilating and digesting a lot of the details. But broad strokes, it's essentially a conflict between Earth, which is kind of a dying empire, and Mars, which is a new upstart planet that's trying desperately to grow and become a viable, self-sustaining planet. It all takes place 200 years after our current present timeline. And there's a whole community of quote-unquote belters, people who make a living out in space, doing business with both sides and getting treated like shit by both sides. So politically, it's very, very complicated, and everybody's always struggling to find enough air, enough clean water, enough money, enough everything. Resources are scarce, and life is a struggle for survival. And making things even more complicated, the end of season 1 brought about this bioweapon that is basically a glowing, self-reproducing goo that pulls energy from any sort of life form and or energy source and grows, and almost like a cancer takes over your body and lays waste to you. And the season ended with our heroes on a ship escaping from this station called Eros, which was horribly infected. And although the characters don't know it, the audience saw it. The thing's already mutated to the point where it can create almost kind of like glowing silhouettes of people, and it has these like giant tentacles. We don't know what the hell it is. We know barely any information about it other than the fact that it's very fatal and very contagious, and you want to stay the hell away from it. So, episode 1 of season 2 begins with the introduction of a new badass character, Roberta Bobby Draper, and she is looks like a warrior straight out of the video game series Mass Effect, and they show her, I couldn't tell if it was a drill or if it was a battle on Mars, and she's leading her squadron through this thing where they're trying to take out these cannons that are shooting at them, and all she really wants is for Mars in 100 years' time to achieve a goal of being green and self-sustaining, and she's more than happy to fuck up anyone who stands in her way. So she's an interesting new addition to the cast that is already teeming with interesting personalities. But back on our kind of hero ship, Jim Holden, who's kind of the unofficial leader, he has this really, really terrifying nightmare where he imagines that the bioweapon is loose on their ship and he sees it floating around Naomi before it comes all out of his body and out of his mouth. It's really terrifying, really gross. But the big thing is he and Joe Miller, played by Thomas Jane, are horribly irradiated from what they got exposed to while fighting Adam arrows. So they get these disgusting things injected in the arms that will cure them of cancer forever, but also render them totally sterile. But at the very least, they're out of any sort of immediate danger of dying of radiation poisoning. Their kind of local thug, madman, trigger-happy psycho Amos Burton, who's also on their ship, opens up a safe that they stole, and inside he finds a perfectly contained bioweapon. It has all the little glowing stuff it is contained, but they're obviously terrified, so they're wondering what to do with it because they don't want it breaking loose on their ship, but they don't want to just blow it up because it might be useful, as Naomi points out, in creating a vaccine to cure people. And also, they don't have any real information about this thing whatsoever, so Naomi very wisely says that they should hide it for the time being. But they watched this video of the people in charge of what happened on Eros, and they're describing it as the proto-molecule, and they're saying that it's first proof of what they're calling extrasolar life, aka aliens. These scientists don't really know what it is, so their goal was to feed it as much biomass as possible to watch it in action. And so at this point, our heroes are pissed, and they decide they want to take some much-needed revenge against the people who orchestrated the essential genocide on Eros, where a bunch of Belters were living in, were struggling to get by but surviving, and they all are now either infected and or dead. We get a nice fight scene where Joe decides to take on Amos for the friend of his that he shot at the end of the last season, and Joe gets his ass just handed to him, and Naomi steps in to save his life before he gets his head torn off. So yeah, Amos is one of those guys where he's useful, but he's dangerous. You don't want to mess with him. One question that I have that I don't know if they've fully answered it yet or delved into it, but I want to know what happened to Julie at the end of the previous season. We saw at the end how these scientists were taking samples from her and like feeding energy into her, and it looked to me like she was being reanimated. I have a feeling what we're seeing is the birth of a new life form, like kind of a hybrid between this biomass or this bioweapon and human beings, but that's still a very much an unanswered question. Now, I have to say, just in terms of broad strokes for both these episodes, my one criticism I had of season one also applies to this, where anytime you have a lot of characters in a room aren't the central characters, you get a lot of kind of bland amateur actors who don't quite have a nice easygoing rhythm with each other, and it always makes me assume that they're going to die really, really soon because they just they haven't decided to invest the time, energy, and money in getting good actors for these parts, which is kind of a tell or a tip of the hat whenever you think someone might be buying it soon, because the really, really good actors are sticking around. But we also see back on Earth, there's all this conflict and confusion about whether or not to go to war with Mars. Clearly, this incident on Eros is being exploited to excite tensions between Mars and Earth. And there's chaos and confusion and misinformation rule. But for me, the least interesting part of this show is following all the politics on Earth. I really don't care. All I care about is our heroes on the ship. And maybe that's just because I'm more interested in kind of a show like Firefly or interested in characters like on the Millennium Falcon than I am in watching politics. That might be a personal preference on my part. So I tend not to let my eyes glaze over, but I have a hard time just getting as invested in the political machinations as I do in our lovable Belters. So our crew, they go to Fred Johnson, or Colonel Fred Johnson, who's kind of the unofficial leader of all the various Belter factions. And these factions are barely even, able to get along with each other, but he's kind of the unofficial leader. And our heroes are basically describing to him what happened on Eros and how they need to get some much needed payback and revenge and find out what the hell is happening. So he asks for volunteers from a variety of Belters because he wants to take a squad of 50 guys and go invade this space station with the help of our main characters acting as kind of an escort. And it leads to this really, really cool space battle where you've got while they're trying to land soldiers on the station, you got the main ship kind of flying interference and fighting a stealth ship, and they're trying to make repairs while fighting all these cannons, and it's pretty gripping, intense stuff. So I like good space battles, whether it's Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, but I like seeing the elaborate chess match of people fighting in space. It's always fascinating. And the show's really delivering in a big way in terms of the special effects and the action. I mean, if you like space combat, the show fucking kicks ass. But what's weird is that when they get to the station, they find a strange scenario where the guards aren't even armed with actual weapons. They're armed with gel guns, which are basically used for keeping prisoners in check. They're not lethal weapons. They find all these scientists plugged into these crazy systems that are almost like virtual reality systems where they're totally oblivious to the outside world, but when they're unplugged, they go crazy. And finally, they find a scientist, the same scientist who was on the videos studying the bioweapon, and he provides some really, really crucial, much-needed information for my part, because I just want to know all about this thing. So Joe Miller's interrogating him, and the scientist admits that while he is sacrificing a certain number of people, it's for the greater good, because apparently the bioweapon was aimed at Earth. So it's proof that there is an otherworldly race that humans have never met that has already fired the first shot and a potential intergalactic war. And he thinks only by studying the weapon's effect on people can they learn how to resist it or possibly exploit it, because he feels like it has the potential to turn humans into essentially gods. It might make them immune to the ravages of space or allow them to travel to the far reaches of the universe. He thinks it's a way to really amp up their evolution as a species, and he doesn't care if the Martians or the Earthlings or whomever controls the science. He just wants to continue his research. He's clearly a madman, but he's got kind of a point. But Joe's having none of that and ends up blowing his brains out. So I have a feeling that's going to put Joe on the outs with all my other favorite characters in the show. But yeah, it's intense, crazy stuff. And I love the fact that this bioweapon is just terrifying. If you think the Borg are scary in Star Trek The Next Generation, like the Borg got nothing on this bioweapon. This bioweapon is so disgusting and so terrifying, has such crazy ramifications. And in the teaser for the upcoming episodes, we see what looks like an animated human being that's half made out of this goo. So I have a feeling we're going to start seeing some like alien space zombies fighting everybody that we know and love. So as you can tell, I'm very excited. I'm very amped up. I'm kind of speaking in a scatterbrained fashion, but I hope you will check out this show. If you like season 1, then you don't even need this review. Just watch season 2. But if you're already a fan, and if you know the books and the show really, really well, I'd love it if you could answer some of my questions about what's happening to Julie, or I don't even mind a few spoilers, but I'm going to probably dig into these books, because I'm just that guy where I'm just not ready to be patient and wait for years and years and years, especially when already 6 novels are readily available. So this show's got pretty much everything. I mean, apart from the occasional confusion I feel from so many characters and all these various subdivisions of political alliances and groups, there are times where I'm a little bit lost in terms of who's trying to do what, but the central drama always works. So is it a perfect home run? No, but goddamn, it is so nice to have really dense, rich, challenging science fiction back on TV. It doesn't really happen that often. Like Battlestar Galactica is a good example. Firefly, which only lasted like 13 episodes, combined with Serenity, was a good example. But I like it when you have a really, really rich world to explore with a lot of depth and a lot of detail. I can't stand shows that are all on the surface. So I'm all in for the rest of season 2. And I hope you will be too. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a subscribe if you feel so inclined. And check out my podcast, Wrong Reel, which is in the show notes below. You can also find me on Twitter at Colbrax if you want to talk about anything under the sun. So thank you so much for watching. And I will talk to y'all next week after I see episode 3. So long.